This reading is called In the Beginning. I woke up in downtown Las Vegas. I felt terrible, but honestly, every day for the last few months, I had been feeling terrible. Today felt like an especially gross flavor of terrible. I scanned my mind in an effort to understand the overwhelming sense of dread that I was experiencing. The day before, starting at about 4 p.m., had been pure euphoria. Truly, I had never felt so free and light as I was feeling the day before. I was strolling around downtown Las Vegas with my best mate, just laughing and being very expressive and just having the best time of my life. I was so perplexed as to how I could wake up feeling the heavy and persistent dread that was now upon me. It then dawned on me that I had taken 100 milligrams of 5-HTP. This was a serotonin-enhancing natural supplement that I had purchased at my local Sprouts organic grocery store. I had researched it and found that it helped with depression and low energy, things that I had been really suffering from for the last 3 or 4 months. I thought that the 5-HTP would be a really good all-natural solution to helping me alleviate my depression and low energetic symptoms. Instead, quite possibly, it had made me very high, much like ecstasy might. This could be causality or whatever the scientific term is, and my experiences of euphoria and the subsequent fall into grossness may not be related to the 5-HTP. But at the time, I found them inextricably linked and threw out the rest of the bottle that I had purchased. I reckoned a trip to the gym may be the magical elixir to eliminate this rotten feeling from my being. On my way to the gym, while I was stopped getting gas, the awful energy, just like this dreadful feeling, started coming onto me even harder, and I realized there would be no trip to the gym. In my next highly questionable move, and something I still question to this day, I resolved to go buy a joint from the marijuana shop down the street from where I lived. I thought that ingesting marijuana would help give me some sort of relief from this really just dark cloud of panic and anxious-like energy. Marijuana was something that I often used to feel better in those days. In the pot shop, I remember just feeling very, very anxious and disoriented. Basic communication to the store clerks was nearly unbearable. Once I got home, I started smoking the joint in a desperate effort to relieve my symptoms. For a few moments, it was okay. I felt a little better. Okay, this isn't so bad, I thought. I then fired up some online poker to take my mind off of everything. Poker was how I was earning my living at the time. After playing for roughly 15 to 20 minutes, I suddenly felt everything start to race. My heart was pounding, my eyes were fidgeting, I was starting to get really cold flashes, breathing was becoming difficult. I felt as if my heart was literally going to beat out of my chest and as if my head was going to explode. I started getting so cold that I had to get in a hot shower in an effort just to stay warm and to soothe my nerves. It wasn't working at all. I kept getting into more and more of a racy, shaky, and disoriented state. As I was considering going to the hospital, I remembered something about allowing energy to move and decided to lay down and just give it a try. When I was laying down, I just remember the energy feeling like electric burning in my brain, and it just kept gathering more momentum and strength. And this was over a year and a half ago, when I didn't have the tools of knowing how to fully surrender that I do now. I had no knowledge of any mindfulness or spiritual tools at my disposal. When I was laying down, by this time, my basic motor functioning was difficult to do anything, and I was becoming very confused. It was at this point that I knew I needed to get help. As I stumbled to my car, I felt on the verge of passing out. I couldn't make sense of much, and I started to experience muscle rigidity and twitching. When I got to the hospital, I could barely speak. I couldn't communicate the desperation of my situation to anyone. While I was in the waiting room at the ER, I just kept grinding my teeth and guzzling water from a sink nearby. My throat was so dry I could barely swallow. Several times I went to a nurse to tell them I felt like I was going to pass out and I needed help. And they would just respond by telling me, well, if you feel like you're going to pass out, sit down. As I sat there fidgeting uncontrollably and sweating with agitation and with my head feeling like it was going to implode or explode, something deep inside of me knew that I would never be the same. I was almost sure I was going to die and truly believed that if I survived, that I would be a vegetable the rest of my life. Finally, after 30 to 45 minutes of this unabated torture in the waiting room, I was treated for what I am assuming they considered a drug overdose. When one of the several needles they stuck inside of my veins entered into my bloodstream, the physiological symptoms slowly began to fade. I just remember my head collapsing from all the stress and trauma and not being able to walk all that well. When they were dismissing me from the hospital, they really didn't have any idea as to what had happened. I remember looking at the nurses for help. I was thoroughly confused and utterly at a loss. I still felt a tremendous amount of dread and anxiety within, and I didn't want to be alone. As I was leaving the hospital, I just kept crying and wondering what had happened and what to do now. They thought maybe the 5-HTP could have caused an allergic reaction. After the event, naturally, I exhausted myself conducting research on what had happened and concluded that it was serotonin syndrome, an often very dangerous and sometimes lethal form of brain toxicity caused by too much serotonin in the brain, usually due to too high a dose of SSRIs or antidepressant medication mixed with like marijuana or another serotonin enhancing drug like ecstasy. I figured the 5-HTP mixed with marijuana the next day had caused this life-altering event, but I will never truly know for sure what happened. It could have been a massive panic attack, although I somewhat doubt it. It could have been my first contact with the Kundalini awakening, then the Kundalini energy. This I feel is somewhat more credible. I believe this event and my subsequent undeniable Kundalini awakening 2 months later were linked in some ways and also separate. But this event could have set the table for what happened next because of the sheer amount of trauma it produced, which is often a catalyst for a Kundalini awakening. I've had to make my peace with the fact that I'll never really know what happened on the day of August 31st, 2017. And quite honestly, these days it isn't all that important to me to know. This horrifying event is what sent me into my dark night of the soul, which I will detail in the next post. My intention in reading these blogs is to give those who will find connecting with my story and my content helpful another option and opportunity to find me. If you would like to support this intention, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, you can like and share this video, and you can also sign up to be on my email list on my website at kundalinidiaries.com.